On today's podcast, I interview Chris Hood. Chris is an author. He's a business expert. He focuses on digital and customer transformations. But what you're really going to appreciate is that Chris is incredibly authentic. He doesn't play it down the middle. He spits the truth, and he talks about how important the customer is and why the customer has to be at the center of everything and every decision a business makes. And he does it in a real authentic way. You're going to really enjoy this. Chris is a digital strategy expert. He has over 35 years of experience in online entertainment, marketing, business development, and he guides organizations on innovation and customer-centric leadership. And we'll talk about that today. Chris previously headed Google's digital business strategy and has crafted transformation programs for myriad Fortune 500 companies. He has also developed storytelling technologies at Fox Broadcasting and Disney. On top of his extensive background and experience, he is the co-founder of Blind Squirrel Games, a company that allows him to grow his passion for the video game industry. He has done a lot, and we're going to get into it today. So, Chris, welcome to the ThriveMore Show.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to have you. As I was doing some research on you prior to this podcast, I just kept coming across more and more accomplishments and more things you've been involved in. So I'm not quite sure where to start, but can we just kind of start with maybe kind of your upbringing and kind of how you went from there to here? That would be great, I think, for the listeners, just to understand how a guy gets involved in all the things you've been involved in.
Sure. Well, I think I got started with my own personal passions, which at the time was movies. I remember growing up and loved going to the movies and spending time with my family. And I remember great classics, like the first time I went to Star Wars and then Back to the Future.
You're speaking my language.
I remember falling asleep in the original Star Trek motion picture. Since then, I've watched it multiple times, and it is still a little boring, but I still love it. But that passion. So I was sitting with a friend of mine in high school, and it was late one night. We were 17 or something, and we were at a local fast food dive at 11 p.m., eating burritos and talking and thinking about like, what movies do we want to go to? So we picked a movie that we wanted to go see for that weekend. And I remember saying to him, you know what? I should get a job at the movie theater. If I got a job at the movie theater, we could get in for free. And we could have more burritos, right? Because why not? We're kids. So I went really the next day and asked for an application at the local movie theater. I filled it out and on the spot had an interview with the manager and got hired. Of course, reflecting back on that now, that's not very uncommon. But I thought it was great. Like, hey, I got a job the same day I applied.
I love it.
Well, I fell in love with just, again, it reaffirmed my passion for movies. And I thought about, what degree do I want to go into professionally? I'm going to college. What should I study? And I had really two options. At the same time, I loved computers, but for me, computers was really a hobby. This was something that I did, in the basement, we'll say. I was playing video games. It was just computers was a hobby. The real career goal was making movies. Wow. Because clearly that was going to be the thing that was more sustainable in the long run. Sure. We never really thought about it in this context back in, again, the 80s. There really wasn't any major startup computer companies. We had Microsoft at the time. Obviously, there was computer games that were being built. But movies, they were making boatloads of money.
Yep.
Well, obviously, fast forward. And what I realized as computers were starting to become more prevalent, especially in the later 90s into the 2000s, that the internet really was nothing more than another form of entertainment. It was another movie. And I began to switch my career path from entertainment to technology, and finished my degree program in technology, got a bachelor's in IT management, then went and got my MBA in business. And then it really hit me. I realized that there was this need to really be a translator between the design and business side of the internet and then the technology side of the internet. And even today, there are so many organizations out there that have the business side and the technology side, and they never communicate with each other. They never collaborate and try to understand how to develop online services that meet the needs of the business and consumers. And so the beauty of my path was that I could take the entertainment and the storytelling and the experiences that we are trying to create and the business around that, and then understand the technology of how to execute on it. And so I spent most of my time at Google basically bridging that gap and helping businesses better understand the use of technology and helping technology better understand how they leverage that technology to support the business. And really, um, luckily for me, I guess, I was able to bring all of that passion from the entertainment into the technology world, blend them together, and then even better, I was able to work for some great entertainment companies and
Sure.
continue that drive, within the industry.
Yeah. Wow. So if we can rewind just a little bit, you won some awards for actual promotion marketing campaigns for theaters, for the likes of Jurassic Park, Wyatt Earp, Apollo 13. These are not small movies, man. These are mega blockbusters. Just tell me about that and tell the audience, what's involved in that, and how did you morph from working in the theater, going to school, to actually, winning these awards for theater promotions and marketing campaigns.
Yeah, what's interesting, so what a lot of people probably don't know is that there's an association. I mean, there's associations for everything, I think now, but there's actually an association called the National Association of Theater Owners. So it's an association wrapped around, it's interesting that it's also called NATO, but it's it all revolves around, you've got all the theaters out there and all of the different companies and organizations that operate theaters, and that's one side of the entertainment business. And this association wants to obviously get more people to see movies in person. Obviously, that's also something that we've struggled with over the course of the last 5 years or so, and that is declining, unfortunately. But at the time, it was big. I mean, again, I remember times when you would go and see a movie and people would be standing in line, and those lines would be wrapped around the movie theater, waiting for multiple shows throughout the day. And, we've kind of lost that nostalgia of movie going experience. But at the time, it was all about how do we entertain? How do we create an experience at the theater itself for these large movies that are coming out? And this was beyond just standing in line, right?
Yeah.
These were elements like, again, if we kind of look historically, calling a bucket of popcorn instead of small, medium, and large, call a bucket of popcorn, the T-Rex, right? The dinosaur, the mega, type of bucket, right? And so
Yeah.
you get these naming philosophies on concession. Well, we're seeing that, play out today across pretty much every, type of movie.
It was kind of merchandising.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
merchandising
Yeah.
started obviously earlier than that,
Yeah.
which I had I had a little bit of insight into. And then just what else could you do at a theater? So, for Jurassic Park, as an example, we brought in like a giant animatronic dinosaur to be inside of the lobby. So as people were coming in, you had a giant, T-Rex
Wow.
looking down at you, and and transforming the theater into the theme of the movie. So these type of philosophies were never really done, and it really changed the way that we thought about how do we market at a theater level, as opposed to just getting your movie posters and your giant standees. Like, let's make it a little bit more interactive. Let's bring in the local community that is around, like, say, archaeology and dinosaur digging. How can we bring that in so that as kids come in, we can have like a little area that they can dig for dinosaur bones, right? That level of engagement to align with a movie, that's really what I focused on. And again, it was more of this storytelling to expand the story from the screen outward to other areas of the experience.
It's an event. You made it an
Yeah.
event versus just let's go to the movies. Yeah. Super cool. Super cool. So that kind of leads us into, because everything you just talked about is customer centric. It's how do we make the customer experience better, right? So you have a book, recently published a book called Customer Transformation. My listeners know I'm an avid reader. So I would love for you, if you'd indulge us and kind of walk us through these 7 stages that you speak to with the customer transformation. And you don't have to go super detailed with each one, but I think they're important enough, and the listeners can learn. I can learn from you giving some context behind each one of those.
So let's start off with what is customer transformation.
Perfect.
Customer transformation is a business strategy that looks at your internal operations, your processes, your technology, and your customers to align with them in order to generate business value. And to put some of this into context right now, I often get compared to, well, that sounds like digital transformation. Well, if you're familiar with the concept of digital transformation, that has become overly marketized and very buzzy, and it's really lost its original meaning. The original meaning of digital transformation was helping organizations evolve their technologies in order to meet the continuous changing demands of consumers, because consumers were engaged with technologies that the businesses weren't using. So how do you provide, say, a mobile service with a mobile app, because your customers are asking, well, how do I connect with you to mobile, right? Well, you need a mobile app. The problem with digital transformation was that the emphasis became too heavy on the technology and lost the rationale or the reason why you were changing that technology in the first place. So what I wanted to do was realign, bring back to the forefront that the whole purpose of all of this is your customer, with a very basic premise that if you're not providing the customer with the expectations, the needs that they have, they're going to go off and find it from someone else.
They'll find it, yeah.
If you don't have customers, you don't have a business. So your primary focus has to be the customers. And I also wanted to make sure that people understood that this was a business strategy, not a technology strategy, right? Because what we see is 69% of digital transformation initiatives fail. Well, why do they fail? Because they're focused on the wrong aspect of the transformation, which again goes back to customer. So I figured if we rephrase this and we said, hey, it's customer transformation, and we put the focus on the customer because that's really who we want to serve, then let's build a framework around this so that we can specify that each stage, 7 stages, are aligned back to the customer. So the first stage is customer. And really, that's your starting point, which is great. Customer is your starting point. You have to understand what your customer wants. You have to understand what their aspirations are, what their needs, how they want to engage with you, who they are, what are their goals. Now, a lot of people will say, duh, like, forget it. Yeah, well, of course. It's amazing how many companies don't actually do it, though.
You're right.
Like, they say they do it, but when you really dive into this, then they're not doing it. We can talk about customer empathy and design thinking and a lot of different areas of understanding the customer. But the number one argument here again is if I said, what are the goals of your customer? Most people will tell us what their own internal goals are, what their business goals are. We're not talking about your business goals. Yeah, your business goals are probably to sell more things to your customer. That's what everybody's goals are. But what are the actual problems that you are solving? What are their goals? Why do they want to engage with you? That's the question. So first one is customers.
Yep.
Second one is interfaces. So interfaces, we get into technology, but what we see is that the customer is interfacing with your business in a lot of different ways. The most obvious is with your mobile device. I pick up my phone, I want to order something, I type it in, I order it, right? The mobile device is pretty much your number one interface with that business. However, what we're also seeing is that these interfaces are no longer what we used to call them touch points, the various touch points along the journey that they engage with you. And now with AI has become an interface. When you talk to your voice assistant, you're no longer touching anything. You can tell Google Home or Alexa to, do something for you. That is now a new interface. Virtual reality, augmented reality, sound. Heck, there's even a product in Japan that is being researched called Taste TV, which allows you to go and actually lick the screen and taste what's on the screen. So we're seeing these multi-sensory mechanisms where we are interfacing back with the business. So once you understand the goal of the customer, then how are you going to interface with them? And then the third one is going to be your actual journeys. These are the actual elements of customer experience and journeys that they engage with you. What's always interesting is when I talk with businesses, they want to start with the journey. They're like, well, the starting point is the journey. Like we have to understand what that experience is and journey. We spend a lot of time with, CX, customer experience. We want to build that out. And the best way that I explain this is when you go to a restaurant, that is the journey, right? Or maybe that's the part of the journey. Really, the starting point, if we were to just walk through the first three steps, is I'm hungry. That's my goal. That's the first stage. And then I decide I want a hot dog. And what kind of hot dog do I want? Well, I could have any type of hot dog and I can go to any number of locations to get a hot dog. And that's the interface, right? I could have a grilled hot dog. I could barbecue a hot dog on my back, grill. I could go to, a restaurant. I could get a boiled hot dog, a fried hot dog, a hot dog on a stick, and then the ingredients on that hot dog is countless as well. That's the interface. The journey is, and the experience is, now I'm going to eat it. And I'm going to satisfy my hunger, right? And the people who I'm with, and I'm enjoying conversation and the ambiance of, if I'm in my backyard with the pool, I put on some music. That's the experience. We tend to want to think about this too soon without understanding what the goal is first and how they're going to engage with you. So there we go. We've got customer, we got interface, and then we've got journey.
Journey. Okay.
Fourth one is ecosystem. Ecosystem is all about the community that you live within. And it's beyond really the community. When we think about digital ecosystems, it's also all of the different ways that your business can interface with other businesses, partnerships, other technologies, to create these journeys, to create these interfaces and experiences. The interesting thing about ecosystem is that there is an external view where your customer is, as well as an internal view with where your organization is. So it's the way, as I talked earlier, of bridging the gap between the business side and the technology side, right? It's kind of working as that again, community and way to scale the business and get feedback from the community about what's working, what's not working, what they want, as well as expanding your business opportunities, business development, and finding new partnerships, to expand out to, right? That's
Sure.
the ecosystem.
Okay.
Fifth one is your culture. This is inside of your organization. Is your culture customer centric? And again, in most cases, the answer is no. In most cases, you go into work, you perform your job, you do what you have to do. And too often we hear, phrases like stay in your lane, or that's not your job, or hey, I've got a great idea that would help the customers. Oh, well, we've got a team, send it over to them. And they've got a backlog and they've got some type of ego complex that, oh, we're the ones who come up with all the ideas. Well, your ideas probably suck and they're not customer centric, right?
Sure.
So the culture is so critical. And here's one of the ways that you can judge if the culture is also aligned back with your customers. Everybody should be able to chime in, to supply ideas, to help you innovate. And if we do a comparison, a lot of organizations care about something like customer satisfaction. There's a CSAT score. They're tracking that. Are our customers satisfied? My first argument is do you have what we'll call an ESAT score? Do you have an employee satisfaction score? Can you mirror your customer satisfaction with your employee satisfaction? And if you monitor those in the exact same way, all of the effort that you put on understanding what your customer is all about, are you doing the same thing with your employees? And if you can say yes to that, then you're getting closer to building a culture that is customer centric, that is aligned with what your customers want. And what we also see is a lot of cases where when that doesn't happen, then you are producing things that ultimately go back to number one, which is you're not aligned with the customer's goals.
Yep.
Okay, so then the sixth one is technology. So we've already gotten through 6 items before we even get to the technology.
Yeah.
And a lot of organizations, like we talked about with digital transformation, or if we talk about any other areas, people want to start with that technology. Hey, we want to build AI. For what? I had a conversation with somebody just a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Oh, we're doing this great thing with AI. Why? What are you doing it for?"
Yeah.
Right? Like everybody's so anxious, like it's the big hype, like we have to do AI. The question is not, do you need AI? The question is why are you doing it? And the argument is every single technology decision you make in your organization, you should have a customer value proposition that aligns to it. If you cannot tell me why the customer needs this technology, then you shouldn't be doing it. There are so many companies wasting millions of dollars out there because all they're doing is going and buying new technology and playing with it.
Yeah.
Again, why? If you can't tell me why the customer is going to benefit from it or how this technology is going to help you reach those customer goals they have, then you're wasting money and time and energy. So don't start with the technology and then try to figure out how somebody's going to use it. Start with what people want and then figure out what technology you need to deliver to meet those goals. The last one is business. So we go from customer to business, and business is all about generating value. If you've done successfully all of these things, then in theory, you're generating value for your organization. Also, this is where we get into the actual value alignment. And I can point out, and I'm happy to talk about it, multiple companies that are in the news today because they are not aligned with the values of their customers. And as a result, are losing drastic amounts of business because of that misalignment.
So let's double click on that, because my next question was going to be who's getting this right and who's missing the mark by a mile. I'd love to talk about that if you could.
Yeah. So, the obvious one is Anheuser-Busch, Bud Light, right?
Yep.
I mean, let's just say what it is.
Sure.
The issue with Bud Light is not actually a marketing issue. My opinion, this is not a case study in inclusive marketing. Put all that aside. This is an issue in leadership, which starts at the business side, and an issue in not understanding what the value and the alignment of your customers is. It's a missed opportunity with demographics. And when you have leadership that doesn't care about the customer, which that's what this is,
Sure.
and you have leadership that is unaware of what's happening within the organization, that's what this is, and you go forward with something, in this case, a marketing, campaign,
Yep.
that does not align with your customer's goals back at stage one, then you will lose business. This is the case in every single scenario. Put politics aside. There is
Sure.
an easy way for you to determine if you are aligned with the values of your organization. And also, what this does is it removes the bias from within your organization. So if there's a belief that we have to do what we'll just call it, we have to do project A.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the question is does project A align with our customers? Yes or no? Does project A have the leadership approval? And does it meet all of the guardrails, guidelines that we have within our organization to ensure that it aligns with our customers? If the answer is yes, yes, and yes, then do it. But if you have one person who's there thinking, well, I want to do this because this is something I want to do, and I don't care if it aligns with our customers, I'm just going to do it anyway. That's the problem.
You'll lose 24% market share overnight. Yeah. 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 Who's doing it well?
Companies like Starbucks. Starbucks is definitely doing it well. Starbucks continues to have a good, strong pulse on who their consumer base is and deliver products and services that align with that consumer base. I would say, sticking in fast foods, somebody like Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A continues to deliver exactly what they say they're going to deliver. They don't deviate from it. They have a very strict, this is what we do. This is what we do well. We want to ensure that our customers are being served, and this is who our customer is.
And it'd be fair to say, right, that both examples, one that was a train wreck or is a train wreck, and another that's just a shining standout in any industry. It's about putting the stake in the ground and say, we're for these people, or this, these are our values. We're sticking here, and we're not for those. Because I've always believed that a strong brand, you attract a lot of people, but you have to repel some, or you're vanilla. And I think when you talk about Chick-fil-A, I think about a brand that has just said, this is our stake in the ground. You don't have to like us or love us, but this is who we are.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we can remove politics from all of these conversations.
Sure. Yeah.
And when we say value, like if we want to, again, just for the sake of this conversation, we can say, from a political point of view, there's values on the left and there's values on the right. And you could say, well, Chick-fil-A is more right-leaning and they're going to put their stake in the ground and that's who they are. But that's actually not what we're saying here. And look, if we go back to Bud Light, I would argue that if you wanted to create a new product or brand to appeal to a new demographic, do it.
Sure.
But don't alienate your existing demographic in the process, right?
Yep.
And that's where we have to look at. If we overly simplified this in terms of a percentage or a statistic, we hear the phrase often, like the silent majority and the vocal minority. Let's put that into context. If we have 100% of our customer base and 95% of that customer base wants one thing and 5% wants something different, then why are you targeting the 5%? That's the problem that Bud Light went in. If they did an analysis on it and they said 95% of our customers expect this, then you don't try to alienate that 95%. This is what we're seeing at Disney right now. Disney is appealing to a very small minority and alienating their entire fan base along the way. Because again, they're just not paying attention to what their majority is. And what is the number? I can't tell you, like, if it was 51% want this and 49% want this, maybe you just scrap the whole thing and you're like, well, I don't want to touch that, right?
Sure.
So you've got to figure out what your balance is. But if it's 60%, 40%, or 30-70, or one way or the other, those are the numbers you've got to look at. That's the data. This removes the bias. This says, hey, I don't care what my personal opinion is. I want to do this because I believe in this. Well, sorry, we're at 70-30 on that topic. We're not doing it.
Yep.
That's what companies have to start thinking about.
Yep. And I'm taking a flyer here, but like, I know you have your own business, your own coaching practice. You're betting your own money, said another way. And so am I in my businesses. I've seen that behavior that you just talked about that doesn't align with just business 101, usually demonstrated by people that aren't betting their own money. They're insulated in a corporate environment and taking massive risk with other people's money, which makes it easier for them to take that risk. But I haven't seen this play out in firms where they're independently owned, privately held, or not at the scale.
Well, what I will say is we're not seeing it publicly. Look, the bias is in almost every organization.
Yeah.
And again, I sound broken. Like, let's just remove the politics from this.
Sure.
When I talked about technology, there are companies that are wasting millions of dollars in technology just to bring in a technology to play with. That bias is coming from CTOs across the organization, across the country, who are like, I really want this technology. I believe in this technology. Heck, we can even get down to brands. Like when I was at Google, the number of times I went into a sales call and it was like Amazon versus Google. And what you had in the boardroom was half the people wanted Google and half the people wanted Amazon. All that was opinion.
Yeah.
None of that was actually rooted in fact. It was like, I'm a fan of, it's no different than Apple versus Samsung, right?
Yeah.
Or McDonald's versus Burger King, Coke versus Pepsi. You have loyalties to brands and you bring that loyalty and bias into the conversation. So when you are doing that for your business and you're like, well, I'm going to go off and I'm going to use Amazon because I just like Amazon better. Well, you are implementing your own personal bias onto that decision, wasting millions of dollars within an organization without even considering, again, does it actually align or meet the needs, aspirations of your customer? Which is why you always have to go back to your customer, no matter what. And so many organizations just want to use somebody else's money or execute their own, personal vendetta on something. Like,
Yep.
That's the problem with businesses today. Do you have that in all of the private companies? Yes, to some extent, that's still there. It's not as public. It doesn't have lasting impact like, say, Bud Light, but the bias and the decision-making is still part of the problem.
Yeah. Which goes back to how you started the entire part right here of customer-centric. And when that customer gets forgotten about, the train goes off the tracks.
You cannot argue against the customer. Like, yeah. I love going into conference rooms and somebody's like, oh, well, we got to do the. And I was like, your customer. Like, I mean, if when you say, look, if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business.
Yeah.
Like, you can't argue that.
Yep.
Like it's funny to watch people try.
Sure.
But the bottom line here is you've got to decide in your organization if you are going to put your emphasis back on the customer or if you're just going to keep doing what you're doing because it works for you or whatever.
Yeah. If we can just unpack just a little bit. Google is obvious for so many of us, Google is this, it's heralded and it's put up on this pedestal because it is an amazing transformative company. And so working inside the four walls of Google and working for that organization, what was your biggest learning? Because that is a special company, and I'm sure they have their warts and all, like every company does. But what would you say were some of the biggest learnings taking that you took away from a company that does a lot of things right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's I think very cliche as well as from the outside it has one view, and then from the inside you get a
Of
completely
course.
different view of
Yeah,
things.
of course.
Look, I loved my time at Google. I love Google as an organization. I think they have made a lot of mistakes in the last year. We see a drastic decline actually in Google as a brand, and yet they're still making money, right? So you've got to give them credit in some areas. I think some of the big lessons learned that I had in Google and the things that I've taken away, and some of them I've included in my book, are around the culture of an organization, are around even simple things like the hiring process. And, we talk about removing bias from internal, decision making, and making sure that that bias is or that decisions are aligned with your customer. Well, that starts at the hiring, right?
Yeah.
Too many organizations are hiring people they know because, like, well, I know them, so I need to give them a job, so I'm going to hire them, right? Or I've worked with this person in the past. Well, you know what? All that is perpetuating your own bias. You need to wrap somebody around you that's going to agree with you so that you can execute something that you want to execute.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't help the business. It doesn't help deliver and serve the customer. So, hiring and culture and communication and how you communicate in teams and your ability to allow people to innovate and participate in activities. Um, but heck, I talk all the time about, uh, you know, being able to allow anybody in the organization to innovate, and then other companies that say, look, that's not your job. Well, heck, even when I was at Google, I had that's not your job. So, it's everywhere. It's in every
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is driven by management style and leaderships and individual people, fear oftentimes that gets in the way,
Yeah.
insecurities that, you're going to take over my job, like these things are politics in any organization is going to make the organization crumble. So what I think my biggest lesson and what I learned most from Google is how to navigate some of that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I applied a lot of that into the book.
Cool. I spent my first 25 years of my career in Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, and I liken it to rites of passage. Damn it, I had to run the gauntlet to get that office and to get this, and so are you. Even though it makes no sense, it's if I had to do it, so will you. And it takes a leader to take a stance to say no more, no
Yeah.
more. It's all results based. We have a lot of people that listen that are looking to be a first-time entrepreneur, or they have just gotten into business and they're looking for every resource they can to help them because, as you know, business is very hard and challenging. Um, if everyone has advice, and it's great, you've obviously got advice that has a lot of experience behind it. So what piece of advice would you give someone that's either thinking about making the jump, which we know is scary as hell, or has just made the jump and is realizing, oh my God, this is harder than the perfect dream I had in my head? What would you share with them?
Oh, there's lots of things to share. So
Sure.
let's start with you're thinking about it. That's going to be your individual decision to make. Obviously, I don't want to influence that decision.
Sure.
I could make the argument to not do it, and I can make the argument to just do it. Right.
Yeah.
These are very challenging conversations. Sit down with people, talk to other people, talk to your family, talk with your loved ones. If you've got a partner, like go through the financial impacts that might have. Um, do your research. Like, what is your idea? Formulate that idea, solidify that idea. Make sure that what you want to do is valid. Too often, heck, if you have ever watched Shark Tank, the number of entrepreneurs that get up in a Shark Tank that have really no clue what they're doing, honestly. You can tell as immediately as they start. Just because you have an idea doesn't make it a good idea, right? Like, there's ideas are easy. There's thousands of ideas. You can ask Chat GPT today for ideas. You get ideas. You got to validate those ideas, and you got to make sure that those ideas have some life form to them.
Mhm.
And that's the hard part, and people believe in their ideas. Like, I use a couple of examples in my book about even from Shark Tank entrepreneurs that were so focused that they believed in their heart of hearts that this was the right thing, but it wasn't,
Yeah.
because it could never be. But that's that bias that's coming in, and that's that, it's so hard for us to let go and accept other people's perspectives, to say, like, that's a good idea, that's not a good idea, or try this or don't try that. Like, that's hard. So start there. Start talking to people, start doing your research, and start solidifying that concept. If you can do that, then I think you're on a good path. Now,
Yep.
let's say that you've already done it and you've got an idea and you're moving forward. One of the first things that we all do for a new business, at least what you should do, especially if you're producing a business plan of some sort, is you're coming up with a mission statement.
Mhm.
Fine tune that mission statement. Understand what that mission is. Understand how that mission is going to go back to your customers. How are you going to attract customers to your mission? We talk about value alignment.
Mhm.
You've got to find customers who are going to align to your values and your mission. So spend a lot of time analyzing that mission. And then when you're ready to start hiring people, make sure you're hiring people to align with the same mission, that have the same passion for that mission as you do. I was talking with somebody actually just 2 days ago, I think, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's so hard because, I get somebody and they're a real pain, but I really need them." No, you don't. You, I use the example of like a web developer. So you go and you hire a web developer, and they're charging you a boatload of money, and you hate them, but you need them because you need your website. No, go find a different web developer. Like, stop surrounding your people with who are going to suck that energy out of you. Go find people, hire people who align with your mission, which is ultimately then to serve your customer, right? If you can find other customer-centric personalities and customer-centric companies, then they're going to understand and they're going to work with you, and they have to be people that you want to be around. And that's often so hard, especially then as we continue to grow and we get into a small company of, say, 10 people, right? Do you want that one person, the 10th person, to just be a pain in your butt all the time, and constantly say, well, I can't fire them, I need them because they're this or they're that? Like, no, like, get rid of them.
Yeah, that'll
Like
suck the
that,
energy.
you're
Yeah.
you're instilling the toxic mentality into your business from the start. Going back to your Chick-fil-A analogy, set the stake in the ground, understand what your mission is, and then align with people who are going to have the same passion for that mission.
I love it. I love it. So we don't have a crystal ball, but if you could wave a magic wand, because I've so enjoyed talking with you because you're very passionate about what you're trying to achieve and trying to, and there's so many people today that play it right down the middle, and I just love how you speak the truth, man. You just spit truth, and truly, Chris. So where do you see you've got this great book, Customer Transformation. Where do you see your business, impact? Where would you like to see it 3 to 5 years from now? What's the goal?
I wrote this book because I do firmly believe that right now, more than any time in the country, I believe, we are seeing, one, a shift in consumer control. That's one. And two, we're seeing organizations make drastic mistakes when it comes to their customers. We talked about Disney, we talked about Bud Light as two examples. There's other organizations that are seeing the exact same impact. So I felt like today is the best time to try to help organizations realign to that belief that the customer is always right. That it's an interesting phrase. Let's come back to that.
Yeah,
But it's really not that the customer is always right. It's that, again, without your customers, you don't have a business. So why are you alienating them? And if I was to look out like 5-6 years, I would love to be in a position where I have contributed to more organizations embracing the customer as being the key element to success. Like you can't there is no other way of looking at it.
yeah,
You can't say I'm going to build technology and they will come.
yeah,
In some cases, yes. But even if you build technology and they will come, it's because it's solving a problem for a customer. And it doesn't matter if you're a small business of one or a nonprofit or a big business of, of millions of dollars, you still have a customer. And it's amazing how much we are forgetting that in either today's society or today's political, arena, or in businesses in general, because you've got all these individual belief systems and individual biases that are coming out. Like you got to put all of that aside. And if I can help any number of companies over the course of the next 5 years to reposition to that belief system, I think in a lot of ways we will be a more healthy organization or more healthy country. Worldwide, our cultures will benefit from this.
yeah. Love it. That's a big dream, which means there's a big possibility. I love that. Like you got to dream big. So obviously your book is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold, wherever else books are sold. But how else can people get in touch with you and even look to engage you as a business coach, bringing you into their organization to help? Where can people find you?
Yeah, the easiest way is on my website, chrishood.com, CHRISHOOD.com. And then on my website, you can also buy my book, or
Cool.
you can find my social media profiles. You can listen to my own podcast called The Chris Hood Digital Show. You can read my blogs, join my newsletter. All the fun stuff is right there, ready for you on my website, chrishood.com.
Love it. And we'll put that in the show notes too, so that people can easily find it. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. I just really appreciate authenticity, and you are genuine, and what you shared was very valuable too. So thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You bet. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any resources mentioned during the show. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. I'd also like to remind you to check out our website, thrivemoorebrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, always remember to set your intentions for the day and strive to thrive.